YellowTelescope's YellowTelecast, the best practices for the best practices, providing the medical industry's best practices to the medical industry's best practices since 2008. Are you a doctor? Do you work for a doctor? Do you want to earn more, be more efficient, retain your team, hire for success, or just want to have a better lifestyle? I bet you do. What should you expect from the podcast? A lighthearted, casual, fun, hopefully funny, informative, impactful, well-founded look at the medical industry from a pair of passionate, competent, confident, experienced, talented, questionably good-looking, unquestionably good-looking industry leaders, men of the Renaissance, if you will, and even if you won't, who enjoy Scotch whiskey, world travel, music, single malt Scotch whiskey, fine dining, not fine dining, family, art, and Ryan bourbon whiskeys while implementing intensive training and expert staffing, resulting in unparalleled growth. Listen to the podcast, and for more on how Yellow Telescope can help you grow, visit YellowTelescope.com for upcoming events, published articles, recorded speeches, past issues of our complimentary email newsletter, testimonials, and more.
There's even a delay when you clap on video, right? So.
Yeah. All right. Hey, John.
Hey, Ed, how are you doing?
Doing well to quite well. Thanks for asking. Yourself.
On a scale of 1 to well, I'm way up there. It's nice to be back. What is this episode COVID-26?
Well, I think it's COVID-3, which equals over a lifetime episode 26. Yes. Still lucky to be in here in the warm and dry, or cool and dry. It's actually warmer outside, as we'll talk about, I'm sure. But great to be back and putting out some more messages.
Yeah, it's fun, and being bored in the house and in the house bored, and doing less and less in terms of travel for work. It's been nice to be able to get several more of these podcasts done. Excited about this episode. The last couple of episodes have really been sort of put together in real time based on sort of what was going on with coronavirus and so forth. And here, as we record this in sort of the mid to late May range, as things are opening up a little bit, people are moving largely into stage 1 or stage 2 of opening. Things certainly aren't back to normal at all, but it's exciting to talk a little bit about some of the positive stuff that's happening, some timely information we're going to cover. But we're going to be talking on this podcast about a few topics. Number one is sort of the state of the union, what's happening out there across the country right now, across all the practices, because you may be already open a few weeks and wondering how you're doing compared to that. You may be not open again until June 8th if you're Massachusetts and wondering what to expect and what's forthcoming. So we're going to talk about that, plus do some topics on staffing and restaffing, who to replace, who to keep, what to do in this time, what's the environment out there as we've been filling positions and sort of seeing the resumes flow in. But we're going to get to that in a little bit. So excited about that topic for the day.
Absolutely. Here we are inside. I know we both got some kind of rainy day appropriate pours here. I'm actually speaking, we've got for those of you in YouTube land, I'm very lucky to have escaped the verdant jungles of Jupiter, Florida, getting pretty frenzied down there in Miami Beach. At one point, our zip code, which John and I share, as we know, we're typically neighbors, and he can look out his window, but now he has to look north and wave to me 90 minutes away. But we talked a lot about how, really the best practices and companies have been saving and preparing for a potential downturn, which I know we've been doing as a company, I've been doing personally, which is why I'm very lucky to be able to be here to escape the madness where our zip code was at one point the 3rd highest infection rate of anywhere in the state of Florida. Highly populated there in Miami Beach. So, but I know your stance.
Yeah, it's a tough life that Ed's living. He and his girlfriend have been forced to leave their gorgeous, multi-bedroom, multi-story home across the street from the beach. Tough as that is, and use those hard-earned and saved dollars to get up there to beautiful Jupiter, Florida, and their acreage, lush lands filled with flora, fauna, pools, and whiskey, as it were. Yeah, here I'm still stuck at home. We're still hanging out here in Miami Beach ourselves in South Beach, but we've got the square footage and so forth to make it through safely. But we are heading up to the Hamptons per usual for summer number, I don't know how many, to get that big open yard here in a few weeks, safety permitting. So it's super exciting. And something we have to talk about as we dive into our whiskey before we dive into our topic for the day. We both, of course, just jumped on this. We hadn't talked to each other at all. I was running a Reception Scope webinar earlier today, our monthly Reception Scope. featured myself this month. And then before that, I was recording a big voice memo for all of our YellowTelescope clients. So I kind of got dressed up. I've been doing content all day. And I was kind of thinking about it. It's real rainy here, real wet, kind of that summer has hit. It's muggy, it's hot, it rains every day. And up in Jupiter by you, the same thing. And I said, today kind of feels like a day to kind of return and feature on the podcast for the first time in a long time. So we're doing some different bourbons and some single malts and some Spacesides after I went to Scotland with Ed last fall to the Speyside region for something real smoky and peaty and maybe not wintry because it's hot out, but just kind of giving you that more fireside chat vibe. So completely unrelated, just showed up a few minutes before we started recording this from different locations. I said, I picked an Islay Scotch. And he goes, I picked an Islay Scotch.
We still got it. We still share a brain, even though we share greater distance at this moment.
Indeed. So what did you select as your whiskey du jour, Dad?
So, it's interesting because, I'm not usually the biggest fan of like a celebrity collaboration, particularly for an Islay whiskey. However, as if you've been following our social media for years, particularly around the holidays, one of my favorite is the great Nick Offerman. Who's basically has a great video of him just sitting there for 45 minutes fireside sipping a Lagavulin. And he's also done some great videos.
By the way, if you want to stop our YouTube or our podcast, if you look up Nick Offerman, Offerman, what show is he from?
Parks and Rec and among others.
Yeah, Parks and Rec. I was going to say Community, but I always get those two confused. But he's on the show and he basically really likes whiskey, and there's a great video of him not just visiting the island on the show, this Islay, but also he does, I think it's a 12-hour or 8-hour YouTube video, and there's absolutely nothing on the YouTube or video at all other than him sitting next to the fire that Ed's describing. So it's nice as a background. I should really make that my next Zoom virtual background, which is a thing.
Yes,
if you don't know, you got to get it.
He's also done some great brand ambassador videos from several of the distilleries, and of course really describes some things beautifully in a wry comedic manner. And he loves Lagavulin.
Comedic manner, Ed? I think it's more of a malted barley.
Okay. So he got his own Offerman edition whiskey, which is an 11-year-old Lagavulin. And he's actually got his face on the bottle right there. Love to have a portrait like that made for you, John. Particularly,
this is everything I want in life. Is just one day for someone to put this mug on my own single malt whiskey bottle.
Oh yeah, the beard you're sporting looks very much like the old-timey Scottish version of Nick Offerman, actually. He says, I've traveled the world and sampled many attempts at pleasing nectars, but it is solely this distillation of Islay, a tiny charismatic Scottish isle that has claimed my palate, yea, and my heart into the bargain. I went for it because, heck, after all, it's an 11-year-old lager, so it's gotta be sip worthy, and I'm a big fan of his, so went with it, and I got to tell you, it is delicious. In fact, I'm going to have a sip before I give you the notes. Tell me about what you're drinking.
Yeah, so when we talk about Islay, for anyone who really cares about it, if like half the people listen for whiskey tips and half for how to run your business better, and you get both free gratis, so no complaints. This is the best we got for you. So I picked something. There's basically on Islay, really, and there's now one or two more that have opened probably since I visited, but there's really 8 core distilleries on the whole island. So if you go to kind of like, the map of Michigan or whatever, if you go to Scotland, basically off here in the, if you hold up your right hand and go to your thumb, there's a big island off there called Islay, I-S-L-A-Y, and there's only 8 distilleries there. And they're very well known for being very smoky and very peaty because they, in order to dry out the malted barley, they would use peat moss because peat is really heavy there, and so they'd slowly heat the peat, which would then blow smoke over the barley, and that would take on that smoky characteristic, which then carries through to the distillate days, months, or years later. And so almost all of them are made that way. So you've got Lagavulin, probably my favorite overall. You've got Caol Islay, C-A-O-L-I-L-A. I'm using the Caol Islay Glencairn glass for all of you in YouTube land. So that's something I got at the distillery. And then there's a few others like Lafroig. There's Bowmore. I've got a little pouring sipping water out of my Bowmore pour, because typically in Scotland you drink it neat or with a little bit of water poured in it to kind of open up the whiskey. Nothing wrong with using a little ice, but probably done a little less there. And then there's Bruichladdich. I think it's probably pronounced Bruichladdich or something like that. And that's the bottle I have today. I am drinking an Octomore 9.3. It's a series. It's called the Dialogos, which is dialogue in ancient Greek, and so it's a head turner. It's about a 6-7-year-old super rocket fuel per usual with John Hoffenberg, 62.3 or 62.9% booze. So it's going to need that water to open it up. So it's strong, not incredibly peaty at 133 parts per million, but quite peaty. It is supposed to have some flavors of smoked tea, a little bit of peach and pear, that sort of general vibe. And that's what I love about the Lagavulin 16, which I'm curious about how your 11 compares, is it's super smoky and peaty, yet at the same time, sort of counterintuitively, it ends very sweet on the finish, which most people wouldn't think would go with smoke, but I find it to be great. And that's why I like it better than the Bowmore, better than the Lafroig, where I own a 1 by 1 square foot or square yard piece of land. But yeah, so I'm going to try mine while you tell me about how yours tastes. Cheers.
Yes, it's actually extremely balanced, because when you do think of anything from Islay, of course, some people just aren't a big fan of that peat smoke, campfire hitting you in the face. You certainly get it on the nose immediately, even on the cork. When you first pop open the bottle, you can smell it across the room. But particularly, this is only 47%. And so it's definitely a little bit smoother.
That's how you know it's whiskey. It's only 47%. It's only 14% more boozy.
Right.
14 proof more boozy than vodka, but go ahead.
Exactly. So it's very smooth. And then on the palate, you do actually get a lot of the ripe fruits. There's some pear. There is a little bit of citrus on the finish as well, but you still get a little bit of the peat smoke as you exhale through the nose after each sip. But it's very smooth. Wish you were here to try it.
Yeah, so mine tastes good. I haven't had a peaty scotch in a while. I've been drinking more bourbon and more summery space sides, and it just tastes like alcohol burn at first. So a lot of times you have to take a sip and just let it sit in your mouth and let your palate acclimate, in my view. So I don't have a real good read on this one. I'm going to put a little water in it just to make it a little less strong, because it's strong. Does not cure COVID-19, but she's close. If I had nothing else and the virus was upon me, I'd take that chance over doing nothing at all.
Yeah.
A little better with a little bit of water. I may have some tasty notes a little later, but it's exciting. Relatively hard to find, not super difficult. The Offerman I know the Offerman's a special edition as well, but I think you can find it in stores. This you can find, but it's probably going to be, I bet this is not 3 times or 4 times better than the bottle you found in Jupiter. But I bet it's probably going that much more, because they're just a limited edition. And what makes this one interesting is it's made specifically from entirely barley from a particular field within their range. I think it's called Irene's Field. So it's all a very, very specific farm. They're very, very specific grain, malted barley, or whatever you want to call it, basically that's being put through the Bruichladdich process. But I really like it. It's very good. Probably wouldn't buy these regularly at full price. For let's say $250, $350, but it's a great bottle for $100, $150, and a great gift. And if I didn't just open, I probably could have sold it for more later.
Nah.
But like I said, it's a rainy day.
That's right.
You might be.
It goes back to my initial point. We save it for a rainy day.
We talk over each other. No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Just the magic of a video based podcast, recording on different devices. Well, shall we dive in?
Yes, it's like everybody kind of that we're watching on all the news channels right now, where they just can't seem to quite get the timing down. But we'll get it together. But no, it's a lot of people have been saying it's been raining kind of cats and dogs, but it actually started raining chickens and ducks here. But the weather has been foul.
I've been waiting for it.
Yeah, Snoop Dogg came by, he needed an umbrella for drizzle.
Speaking of timing, I love to just let those sit out there in the ether.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
Well,
they're literally, Hendrix was excited. They rained candy out of the sky. Yeah. Sprinkling, I mean.
sprinkles.
Yeah, it wasn't so good. I may have more. We'll see what happens throughout the day.
Yeah, we usually need a rest at
Yeah,
mid.
what we're focused on is helping our practices rain money, because there's about to be a change in the weather.
I like it. Bringing it full circle. So we've been continuing to speak to dozens of practices here every single week. And of course, between John, myself, Dan Grantham, Abby, John Barry, our whole team at Ice Cream Social Media, we're seeing a lot of different things and keeping each other in the loop as to what we're actually seeing. And it's been interesting, as John mentioned, this is, I think, our third podcast since, what was it, March 18th or 20th or something, right when that first wave shut everybody down.
Yeah, it might have beaten the last year combined.
Yeah, exactly. We've done 3 now in the last 2 months. We'll see how long we can keep this pace up as long as we're at home. And it's been interesting to see how, the first one was sort of, all right, managing initial response to things. Then second of all, we had, okay, now managing reopening and marketing and building towards a great future. And what we've been seeing now most recently is, while there is going to be some variation, I know you're going to speak to that, John, about where people are actually reopening, how they're reopening, and of course there's question marks as to when there's going to be another shutdown. What we're seeing is what's the most important when it comes to your staff management. Of course, what we're also seeing in this kind of unique staffing market where the unemployment rate's been higher than it's been since the Great Depression, but who's actually unemployed and how does that affect the staffing of our practices? And then, of course, maybe some big ideas. We're taking this time to be sort of introspective and think macro as we actually head into 2021 at this point. I mean, 2020 is going to be what it's going to be, but how do we actually position things heading into next year? So it's going to be chock full.
It is, and I've been taking notes, Ed, with my Lefroy pen.
Yes, I got one of those.
So yeah, I think we hit almost for the cycle. We got Lagavulin, Lefroy, Bruichladdich, Bowmore, Kalila, Glass. So we're just missing a couple. I don't know, some now defunct stuff. Port Ellen, which I hear is coming back. So we're getting really nerdy on the Islay whiskey jokes. So yes, we've got a chock full plan. And what I was thinking is just to kind of frame our discussion. We know that there are certainly practices that are struggling right now. We know there are practices that are thriving, which is true in probably any environment, economy good or bad. We've talked that the unemployment is likely to hit Great Depression levels, times X, who knows, 25%, something like that. But I want to talk a little about where our practices are at, just to kind of frame the conversation. And so we've kind of talked on our last podcast that we've been through 2008. We've been through Zika here in Miami. We've watched Ebola go by. We've been through the 01 crash, the 97 crash, 9/11, all the different things that have happened. We're kind of, we're old dogs a little bit and kind of are prepared for this. So we don't get too scared. We talked a little bit about how in the beginning of the podcast that we've really saved and planned. We predicted not this, but we predicted a recession this year, if not last year, the year after that. We knew sometime in the next 1 to 3 years we get a recession. And so we took all of our money out of the stock market. We saved a ton of money. We were careful in our hiring decisions. And yeah, we're going to thrive and grow through this as a company. You realize if we don't, why would people be hiring us as a consultancy if we weren't thriving and prepared for bad times? And so we think we've got something to offer, and we're doing and navigating this a little better than everyone else. And I think that more than any time in my career, I am absolutely sure that any single client that ever hired YellowTelescope long-term consulting services or ever attended our annual seminar, anybody that's ever worked with us, there is no question that the value is being really reproven of why we're worth it right now, because our practices are busy. So I want to just start off by quickly, if I may, just doing a quick laundry list, just rattling through a few results just from this last week. And right now, as we record, the 21st. So these are basically results from May 11th through around May 21, and then projecting out into the last week of May, when we know that Massachusetts is opening late. Most of our other offices are opening now, 2 weeks ago, or over the next week or two. And so this is just a quick smattering. In no particular order, a practice in Texas, 150 patients in the office last week buying 19 surgery consults, 17 booked same day. All-time record for May will occur for their spa, and maybe all-time record for sales for their business at all in May. Georgia, 13 consultations booked in a row on the spot for surgery, 5 more set. Their second contract with us is for their med spa. They're having a record-breaking month all time. New York City, really hard-hit urban area, 7 surgery consults this week, 7 next week, and this office books 85–90% same day. They're booked out a month when they reopen. Oregon, brand new practice. Somebody took a chance on us, basically had almost no revenue, still hired us for the long term. I joke around that all the senior doctors that do $3 million, $10 million, $20 million a year that hire us, their biggest regret is not hiring us 20 years ago, but they can easily afford us now. And the young doctors that take a chance, even though it's a little scary to spend the money, they're seeing the results. We have a client that's brand new that Ed actually manages, 3 to 5 consults a week out of the gates. They're 85% booking ratio with the new coordinator they hired, and they're booked out a full month. Massachusetts, we're fully booked till July 14th, 7 lipo consultations this week. Beverly Hills, 8 out of 8 booked on the spot last week, fully booked till July 15th, on pace for an all-time record. Orange County, San Diego area, 30 out of 32 cases booked over the last 3 weeks, averaging 10 a week with 1 patient coordinator, 10 new cases a week being booked. They're booked out 90% of the way through August. Rhode Island, 13 for 13 last week, 9 consults set this week. An office here in Miami, 215 leads they got this week. One of our SEO oversight clients, 20 to 22 surgery cases booked over the last 3 weeks. Each week, that's 20, 20, 20, 60 to 67 surgeries booked over a 3-week period. Another Texas practice, 18 to 21 consults booked for surgery, 18 more consults this week with 4 days to add. New Jersey, hard hit state, 7 out of 7 surgery consults booked, all virtually. The team booked 16 out of 16 surgeries last week. Massachusetts, another office, 7 out of 7 booked last week. South Carolina, they've been open for several weeks. They booked 13 out of 13, then 12 out of 13, then 10 out of 10, 35 cases booked over 3 weeks, 7 more coming up the rest of this week. They're booked out over a month, and they're gonna have their best month of all time. And they weren't even closed in April fully. Not to go on and on, a couple last ones. Maine, 16 out of 19 consultations booked 2 weeks ago. This week they have 22 consults set, 171 people going to their med spa over a 3-week period, averaging almost 60 sales a week there. From their social media, which we're working with them on through Ice Cream social media, they got 216 social media leads last month and 837 new followers. I can go on and on. Hawaii at a $250,000 week, 16 out of 16 booked, 70% booked through July. Offices in Colorado, their organic visitors to our SEO oversight group are up 77% year over year in April while they were closed. So quote unquote, smaller boutique practice in Colorado, 100% booking ratio, 6 more set next week. LA booked out 6 to 8 weeks. Scottsdale booked 5 out of 5, 10 more this week. Palm Beach, Florida, 4 to 4 last week with 5 more set. Chicago, Illinois, 11 out of the last 12 consults booked. Long Island, one of the hardest hit areas, 11 consults, 9 booked. The point that we're making and rattling off literally 3 or 4 minutes of this stuff is to change your mindset towards your practice. There are people kicking butt right now. There are people booked out months and months and months. There are people booking 90% of their patients the same day over virtual consultations before even hanging up the webcam. And that is not the minority or the anecdotes I gave you. That is the majority of the clients that we work with, and that you can be as well, whether you hire us or not, if you have the right attitude and approach to your business as we open for this. We're gonna talk a little bit about that 2-year plan coming up. That's what's shaking over here at YT.
Well, I love hearing it. I mean, it fires me up because, you know, I've got my own body of proof with the clients that I talk to on a very regular basis, and then hearing the same exact things happening with practices that you help manage, the same things happening with the clients that Dan helps manage, the same lead counts right here from John Barry, everything that's going on with the team at SEO Oversight. And I almost have to give the disclaimer sometimes because, you know, we have maybe 1 or 2 or 3 practices that we work with that just didn't get on the program, and lo and behold are not getting anywhere near the results as anybody else. And I get frustrated, not because of my ego or that I'm just like, guys, you know, what's wrong with you? But the whole idea is I'm seeing my whole worldview, my attitude, my mentality, my mindset is everybody else that's crushing it. And of course, a lot of this, as we say, goes without saying. Of course, we might get shut down again. Of course, we will maybe have to move cases back again. Of course, we're going to have to continue to juggle things. But what we're seeing is the consumer demand, and with coordinators that are really being proactive at a very high level, following a very specific protocol consistently, are getting all the very best results. And it's crazy because, of course, I've been, not only an early acolyte of this process and helping to develop it, but just living and breathing it for so long and believe that like the sky's blue. But now more than ever, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's become indispensable, and how replicable it is, because I've never seen something more consistent across the board with the practices that are following it so well. Anyway, so my frustration comes out of those that are just sort of like, come on guys, get on program because it works. And I think that your success and your failure is my own. So anyway, it's really fun to see.
Like we said, we referenced some of those practices are monsters. They're really big practices with very successful tenured doctors that could weather the storm easily from a financial perspective. But many of them are younger doctors. Many of them are smaller boutique practices. Some of them are brand new, and they're weathering the storm well. So I don't believe that the cheesiness of it's all attitude. I mean, it doesn't matter what your attitude is if you own a hotel. You didn't have a good month last month because no one could stay there by law. But to the extent that we're building towards something in the future, your attitude really has physically dictated ultimately where your results are at. And we're seeing that again across the board, these superb results for those practices that are on process, so you can get there as well. And part of it just starts with saying, we're going to get out there. So one of the things we had predicted and recommended, which is just a good tip for those of you guys out there getting reopened, is to not turn off your marketing. Don't turn off your SEO. Don't turn off your pay-per-click marketing. Don't turn off your social media advertising. Now, some of that we would get paid to do if you're an ice cream social media client, but a lot of it we wouldn't. A lot of the stuff is just stuff we recommend they continue spending on. So we're still advocating for spending money on profit centers. Cost per click is actually pretty cheap on Google AdWords and social media right now. Social media usership is up. People are getting more used to purchasing because they're getting more used to this environment through social media, through apps, through Amazon, getting their groceries delivered and so on. And this is going to be a big step forward for that social media and online purchasing process. So those are all good things that you guys could be doing, is just turn that stuff back on, and maybe even look for low-hanging fruit campaigns that you could take advantage of. Maybe there's no one doing Google AdWords for otoplasty or lip filler or some other more specific kind of thing within your market, and let's go after your hair restoration doctor. Start advertising eyebrow restoration. You're a women's wellness doctor. Start advertising your Thermiva or vaginal rejuvenation. Find something that's niche for you. Go after gynecomastia terms. Go after something that not everyone's going after besides, say, Breast Dog New York or LA, and keep working and investing in marketing. And our clients who have done that have done well. We had 2 or 3 that still turned everything off. They don't have any leads. They're really struggling, but the vast majority have kind of listened to that. And it's not that they're bad people for not listening. I mean, everybody's just going through this for the first time. You have to make the best decisions you can. Everyone's under different circumstances, but there's business out there and it's worth doing. So with that in mind, the real question is, okay, well, I'm getting reopened. Maybe I'm pretty busy or very busy or not very busy and struggling. What do I do at this stage? What if I lost a couple of employees, or what if I don't really like some of my employees, or what if my employees are good, but I'm not sure if I can pay them as much, or if I should retain them or give them a pay raise? What is the environment? What should I be doing right now when it comes to staffing and upgrading? And that's one of our beliefs, is when you have nobody, you need somebody. And then once you have somebody, you want to upgrade that role to make sure you have an A+ player within that role. And up until this thing happened, we know that we were very much in a buyer's market where every employee could kind of write their own ticket, dictate how much they wanted to earn. If you don't want to pay it, they go find a job somewhere else. You really had to be the best leader, the best manager, and pay top dollar to have talent. And things that maybe shifted a little bit or about to, but I want to kind of get your feedback, because I know, Ed, you're staffing a few different positions, and I think between you, me, and Dan, we probably interviewed over 10,000, 15,000 people over our careers. So what's the situation? What should doctors be doing? Wax poetic a little bit, because I think people are curious as to what the environment really is.
Well, yeah, no, I appreciate it, John. It's been interesting just because I have been staffing jobs, and one of the things that we've been talking about is, while we look at our role is to actually retain folks in a practice, right? I want to find the best people and then have the best processes and have them have all the support that they need and perform at the highest level, which is rewarding, and then they get to keep their job because they're doing a great one. Now, of course, staffing's imperfect. Humans are imperfect, despite the best coaching and processes. Sometimes it just doesn't work out. Life changes, life happens. People don't necessarily become as adaptable or want to grow as much with the practice. And so there are also sometimes in the previous staffing market, it was so hard to find necessarily good people because everybody had a job. and it wasn't exactly the employer's market, it was the employee's market, and that shifted literally overnight. And so it's been fascinating to see the type of applicants that are coming in right now, and then I think it's really a reflection of what's going on in some of their businesses, and provide some guidance for what our clients can do. So for example, I've probably screened over 200 resumes over the past month or two during this time, not because necessarily people were laid off, but because the doctor took the opportunity to, as you say, had the staff that wanted to upgrade. He had a growing practice, has a growing practice, and it's actually one of the record-breaking practices that you cited in talking about some of the results, and decided that even though he was at the time a 2-doctor practice with 3 surgical coordinators, one of the coordinators wasn't doing as well, and so took the opportunity to find somebody better. So we turned the job ad on, and of course it's our job to sift through those resumes and then reach out to the candidates that look kind of promising on paper. Now, of course, in any time we do this, in almost any market, the vast majority aren't necessarily going to be people on paper that we're going to reach out to, but looking for that diamond in the rough sort of turnkey person, they actually found an excellent candidate. Of course, it took 200 resumes to do it, a dozen or so phone screens from me, and then like 3 live interviews from them to find the winner, and they're actually putting an offer out right now. But through my dozen or so phone screens, it's been interesting because there were people that, we're talking about their experience, we're talking about, why they're looking to make a change. And actually the vast majority of the people that we're speaking to, even though it said 2017 or 15 to the present on their resume, were laid off. They are now looking for work because their boss either panicked and shut down, or they're just like, I don't know, I'm looking for an opportunity right now, even though I might get rehired. So what was interesting is that in the back of their mind, psychologically, there was still a chance, quote unquote, they might get rehired. So the urgency to find the new job immediately, I feel generally wasn't as strong as it was, say, in 2011, after people had been laid off for a year or two. Second of all, of course, we can't legally ask anybody what were you earning in your prior job, but we can try to feel out what they might be hoping for in an eventual new future position. And what's interesting is that plenty of folks, were still looking to be in the $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 range, which of course sometimes they admit they were making without me asking. And so what I found was, for a patient care coordinator in a, sort of mid-tier suburban market, we're still basically trying to command just as much as they were just earning in the position they were just laid off from. So they hadn't necessarily felt enough pain quite yet to even have any change in their expectation from pay, which I think was fascinating. And what that also means is, I think that for the people in your current practice right now, while they should feel lucky to have a job, and we've been telling the patient coordinators and any staff member we work with, let alone the doctors, how lucky they are to work in this industry, that they're lucky to not be one of the 15% of people that were laid off. And we can talk about how the doctor can present that. But at the same time, we're still lucky to have them, even though there are good people out there. The type of people that are being laid off that are unemployed at this particular time aren't exactly the higher level employees, communicators, salespeople, management experience that we'd be looking for say, a patient care coordinator or that type of role. A lot of MAs that are getting laid off, and people in the surgical side and things like that, because they weren't even able to work. A lot of the folks that were in the patient coordinator role weren't laid off because they had the ability to work remotely, and because they, really such a profit center for the practice. So if they're good, they're there. So finding that, finding that perfect turnkey, previous 10 years of experience in plastic surgery, high sales level, demonstrable results, and possibly bilingual is really the needle in the haystack right now. But we found one in this particular market. She's hungry. She's a great salesperson, was laid off, has prior experience, and her personality is a great fit with the practice. I'm really excited about it. So we're in those sort of final stages, but let me stop waxing there.
Yeah, so great waxing. And I think that the way I kind of look at it, and I think all of your context there really shows us kind of the state of the union with staffing right now, which is what we hear is layoffs have occurred and are continuing to occur and are getting worse. The people who have been laid off are unsure if they're furloughed and coming back or if they're really truly laid off. And even if they are truly laid off, they haven't really felt the pain, which I know I have. I've been fired and laid off before, once each in my life. The real pain that comes with that being extended. There's a lack of clarity in the market for these people, whether they might just happen right upon another job right away and be fine, or whether they are going to be unemployed. Now, every day that passes that an individual doesn't get a position, which I remember there was a 6-month period it took me to find the right fit for me. That's significant if you don't have savings. That urgency and desperation builds. And where you wish to hire people, and this is not to take away from the idea that people are people and that we care about them generally, but one of the things I really preach, even in our Yellow Telescope seminar, is that you never want to hire desperate. Desperate is, the reason I'm going to work hard for you, Ed, is because I got to feed my kids and I'm going to be homeless in a week. As sad as that is, that's the kind of individual who's going to steal and embezzle, not because they're a bad human, but if you or I or anyone in YouTube or podcast land had no money to even feed their children, you do what you got to do. I mean, you go steal a loaf of bread, you do something to make sure you eat. On the opposite extreme, when someone's super unhungry, they don't really need the job, and that could be for good reason. You know, maybe they're just married to a multi-millionaire. Well, congrats, but they may be the right person at the wrong time. I don't want someone who's not hungry. Now, if someone's hungry despite being married to a billionaire, great, but I want someone who's at that right point in their life. And sometimes you find a really good fit, but they're not really motivated, they're not really hungry, or they're very well employed, or it's a great economy and they say, I don't want to go anywhere unless I can get $1 million a year. And you say, gosh, I just can't afford that. That's too much money for the job. So what we're trying to do is find that sweet spot for our clients. We're either find the miracle diamond in the rough like you just did, or we're patient enough to wait. And so what we're predicting, and really getting back to my initial point, is we want to have a structure and a plan for the next couple of years. And so what I would advise, based on the feedback that you're giving me, and it's very similar to what Dan is doing, he's staffing a couple of jobs. I'm just filling one right now. But when I look at kind of that trajectory, what I know is that pain is going to build. I'm getting tons of resumes right now just from LinkedIn. I think on our last podcast, I mentioned it had gone up like 8,000% in a week. And most of them are medical device reps and pharma reps and medical people and so forth. And I emailed one yesterday because we're filling a position. And she was in the market. I said, hey, are you interested in this kind of job? Do you want to get out of device sales and maybe into a practice setting? And she said, well, I'm looking for a base salary of at least 90,000 and a plus commission, and I'd like to be in outside sales. And I had replied back to her saying, this position, to be quite honest, can earn you in this market over $90,000 if you do well, certainly long run, if you do really, really well, but it's in an office. And she said, I said, but the base pays lower, just flat out, but there's some great commission and you can legitimately earn that. Her response was, no thanks, I only want outside sales and at least a 90K base, which means she's not feeling that pain yet. And she may not need to. I think the cream rises to the top. There will be high level people who are always employable. They can write their ticket and they should. But for that individual, she's either right and she's that good. I always felt that way about myself, whether I deserved to or not. Probably at different times in my life, I was like, I'm not settling for anything less. And I would just stick it out. And that meant sometimes I was unemployed for 6 months. Or she may find out in 4 months, like, oh my gosh, why did I burn a bridge with that job? I was crazy not to interview. I begged for a job right now. I could lose my apartment. So that pain is going to build and grow. While another thing you touched on is really important for people out there to realize is that although the unemployment rate may hit 25% beyond Great Depression levels or at them, and right now maybe it's 15%, which is 5% worse than the Great Recession of 08, some of that's temporary. Many of them are employees from manufacturing that really just couldn't apply for this or just would never get the job, are food service workers or hospitality workers. Now, there's some people in hospitality that could translate from a service perspective, but not mostly. And so when you look at 40, 50, 60% of the layoffs being in those specific sectors that don't translate, we're still not at the point where unemployment's that high. So like Ed said, retain everyone you have that's good. Pay them market average or a little better so that they'll remember when things are not so good that you didn't lower their pay and beat them up and treat them poorly just because there's people that could take their job. But if you do have those roles where someone isn't living up and they're not quality and they don't want to grow with the times and they're going to dinosaur out, then it's time to move on. And the market's already good to find talent, but it's not great yet. In a few more months, maybe even a year, we'll continue to build a tranche, a cadre, if you will, and honestly, even if you won't, of unbelievable candidates. And you're going to be able to upgrade every role to make sure someone's an A+ player, which sort of leads to, and maybe you can kind of kick this off at, the idea of before I go off and find a replacement, which is still expensive to train, not ideal to have turnover, and not the goal. If you got a terrible egg, get rid of the egg. But if you've got someone and you've got someone great, keep paying them, pay them well, if not market average or more. But when you have those people in between who maybe due to COVID and just the things that have happened or due to other circumstance or history, they're not quite seeing the light, but maybe they're a good person who has real potential still. You don't necessarily want to get rid of them, but maybe they're not growing with the times. Maybe they're not personal growth oriented. Maybe they're not reading the books. Maybe they're entitled a little bit still and still feel like they're just, everything should be given to them and handed to them and they're God's gift to everything, but you're not quite ready to get rid of them. How can we go about having that conversation to try to retain first and build an office of A+ players, or get them back to their A+ level if they've slipped back down to B-, B, or B+, before we have to go out into that market and do the tough work of hiring, training from scratch?
Well, I think at this time, certainly while we have, as we mentioned, many practices that are back to work, that are back to treating patients and are actually busier than they've ever been. And similarly, regardless of those that even have less time than they did just a few weeks ago when they had nothing but time, there are plenty of folks who are actually making the best use of the fact that they have some additional time by doubling down on their interaction with their team, which I think is super important during this time to keep your team engaged. Because if you've got that kind of entitled person, they are going to love the fact that they get to work from home in their jammies, if at all, or even stay on the payroll and not even necessarily do as much work and kind of phone it in. So the increased engagement and setting that level of expectation is going to be super important. I mean, we actually just signed a client that comes to mind. Can you believe it? In COVID, actually I've had another agreement come in. It's actually one of several. I think we've had several sales like every single week. But I was so excited to sign on with this practice who got docketed for December. She's in Michigan, and she's been doing a daily 9 a.m. Zoom video call with her team, the whole team. She didn't furlough anybody, from practitioners to her patient coordinator to the nursing staff, et cetera. Everyone is actually involved. Now, part of the guidance that I'm giving her at this time is not only just the structure of the type of meeting, but also going to be the one-on-one. In fact, I'm joining their team meeting next Thursday as sort of a kickoff to our YellowTelescope, 5-year agreement. And so with that all said, step one is increased team engagement. Don't think just because you're back and you're a busy doctor or manager again, you don't have to connect with your team on a regular basis. You should be having a daily 5-minute powwow. You should be MBWA, managing by walking around, as we say, even if it's virtually, just be checking in with them.
Yeah, maybe it's easy to retain, but you're not looking for retention. You're really looking for excellence from each team member, which takes more than just, hey, you got a job and you're lucky to have it. Even though that's true, they are really lucky to have it.
Right. And so I think that first you do need to have that level of communication with them to allow you to have a more pointed conversation. If you haven't talked to your employee in 3 weeks and all of a sudden come in and basically say, I need you to perform at a higher level and you're lucky to have a job, that's going to push them even further away. They're going to resent that sort of sentiment and be like, where you been for the last 3 weeks? Now you're coming to me with some sort of guidance. So in fact, at that point, they may be one of the ones applying to the jobs that we're staffing on the job boards. So number one, yeah, exactly. So number one, increase that level of engagement with your staff directly one-on-one during this time. Be doing some due diligence about how they're doing, what they're safe coming back to in the office, how they're doing with productive. Make sure they have the tools that they need to be performing at a high level. So that almost asking those questions in that way sets the expectation that your expectations remain high and may even be higher given the level of productivity you hope to see from them during quote unquote this time. Now, if you're not seeing from that person, I think that you can broach the subject, say, now we've been talking, pretty consistently here for the past few weeks. We are looking ahead and clue them in and exactly what your plans are for the coming months. Again, all things going our way. And then even into 2021, painting a little bit of the picture of what you're kind of hoping to see in the practice, and then narrowing down to what you're hoping to see in their particular role. Paint the picture for what success looks like. If they're an incentivized individual, talk about the volume that you're hoping to expect, and actually paint the picture. I'm talking to coordinators right now, talking about how we're thinking about hiring another doctor for the practice, and now you've got 3 surgeons to promote, and at some point next year we're going to add NeoGraft. So can you imagine what it looks like if you are currently selling 1 to 2 million right now, sell 3 to 4 in 2021? What does that bonus even look like? You don't even have to ask for a raise. It's just all there if you do the work. Now, she's a motivated person. But by having some of that same conversation, even with someone who isn't as motivated, painting the picture of what it looks like, then backing into what you need to do, and actually, we call it the Oreo cookie or the sandwich conversation or whatever. Now talk a little bit about some of the specifics of maybe what you haven't seen, of what you would like to see better going forward. And then provide that specific, whether it is, I've seen, I actually, took a look, obviously, we have access to your next step to-dos, and I actually see you're kind of behind right now. And, also took a look at some of the actions in there, and really it was only like 50 or 60 patients last week. It really needs to be like 500 or 600. So I want to talk about what those results look like, what the action should be, what that does for you in the practice, and I want to be able to help you get there. But also, I want to remind you too that in some ways, it's tough out there for a lot of people, and we are very lucky to be in this position. And I'm not going to sit here and be like, you're lucky to have a job. We're lucky to have you as well. But in some ways, loyalty is a two-way street, and I'm going to continue to pay you what I've been paying you, and give you some additional incentive to really help us out here. So there's even better opportunity at this time. And frankly, I kind of want you to remember that, that when times are kind of tough, that, going forward, when times are good again, I'm hoping that I'm paying it forward and that you're going to be able to stick around. But in the meantime, here's kind of what I'm looking for. And what do you say? Are you on board? Now, I summarized, you can distill.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. And I think that if you're listening to this out in podcast land, one of the things you can do is if you actually click the go back 15 seconds a few times there on everything that it's saying, one of the things that you can get from these podcasts, whether you're already a client or whether you're quite honestly taking the free content until you can afford to become one, is there's so many great word tracks that Ed just covered there that are not easy to repeat unless you jot them down, that just come off of his tongue and Dan's tongue and so on just so smoothly, and really can help create the right understanding. Because like I said, we can go hard and say, you're all really damn lucky to have a job. And that's just going to make them find a new job. It's not that hard. Even when it's 15% unemployment, 85% have jobs, and good people get hired soon enough. If they don't want to be with you, they're not going to be with you very long. At the same time, when you've got great people, you want to retain them and cultivate them. So, it really reminds me of, two interesting anecdotes. One is your new client you signed. We signed another one for long-term YellowTelescope just a few weeks prior. You signed another one this week. Things like ice cream social media were out of control. We're actually hiring ourselves internally to keep up with demand for paid social media advertising. If you're not doing it, you're losing money, period, end of story. As far as I'm concerned, complete loss of ROI for you, so you should be getting in touch. So ice cream social media is going nuts. Web marketing is coming back. And although we didn't expect YellowTelescope to be as busy because we know people are a little bit fearful of costs right now, we're continuing to sign deals. I know Ed is now booked into 2021 with that new deal, but that particular client is like you could hear forward thinking. Most of the people listening to this right now are not running any meetings with their team. Most of the people certainly aren't having a daily Zoom. And I'm not sure a daily Zoom long run is prudent in terms of time spent. That makes a lot of sense when you're closed, but that kind of forethought and conscientiousness, that person's reading book, that person's listening to podcasts, that person is focusing on personal growth. And what's interesting is that individual heard about us, I believe, originally through a podcast from listening to this exact YellowTelescope, YellowTelecast Best Practices for the Best Practices podcast, which is pretty cool. The other thing is, it reminds me of one of my favorite clients, Dr. Sonia Merriman. And what's amazing is she's given me the idea, which I have been preaching to a lot of my doctors, of buying your team an Audible account, which is basically a way to listen to audiobooks on your way up and back for work, particularly for those clients that are in an area where people drive up and back and have long commutes. That's just a personal growth idea where you're spending $30, $50, $100 a month on your people. You're getting back more than that $100 because they go home to their own parents. They can be 40 years old. You talk to your mama, if you're lucky enough to have her in your life, and you say, well, yeah, my boss bought me access to personal growth and wellness books, and she brought in a consultant from outside to help me grow personally and professionally, and she's spending time with me every morning, and she didn't cut my pay, and you know what, she's keeping me employed, and you know what, that person's in for life. And if they're not, that's okay. They don't owe us anything, but it's that exact idea that I'm going to grow people first, and in another way, I'm going to grow myself first so that I can grow my people. I would maybe distill that down to, I'm going to grow myself so that I can develop my people. I'm going to develop them first by growing myself. And those two things really translate very, very, very well. So I want to, that's my distillation of it. Now, yes, there's a conversation to be had there that they're lucky to have their job, but the way that conversation should come across is exactly in the word tracks you heard from Ed before, which I won't go into again. I guess the last thing I want to talk about, at least on my end, if I kind of change subjects, is just sort of a philosophy that I have, which is I think that I see a lot of articles. In fact, I got a PR request today for business leaders who want to talk with some newspaper or magazine. I don't know if they'll pick me or someone else, but basically the request from the PR board was information on what the future is going to look like now that this has occurred. And I'm going to go ahead and throw out my version of that, which is it's going to look like just basically like it did before. I don't think much at all is changing. Netflix was here before, it'll be here after. Zoom existed, people used it a little more. Webcams existed, we use them a little more. Consultation existed, we'll do a few more virtual ones. But one of the things that people are baking in the cake is that COVID's not going away. And I believe that short run. I don't think they're going to have a vaccine for a little while. I think we'd be lucky if we get some mitigating medicines to minimize mortality, but it'll still be here for some time. But one of the other things that's very much true of one of two things will happen otherwise. One is we will hit some sort of herd immunity miracle kind of thing just over time by everyone getting sick. I hope that's not the case. Or B, we will get a vaccine. So my attitude actually is, how are you preparing over the next 12 months for when everything does go back to the way it was before, which is a post-election positive economy with strong forward momentum, with a huge interest in medicine and aesthetics, with everyone going back out to every restaurant and traveling more than they ever did. That's actually the future. Nothing's really changing. People are like, well, it's COVID and things are going to be a new normal now. Well, new normal temporarily. The long run is actually the same. And so when I'm talking with my doctors about things that we just kind of like to wax poetic and philosophize on, we talk about running the business, but I'll say, what are you investing in? Well, I had 100% of my money on the sidelines, basically 95%. Well, I dropped about 35% of my powder keg in after that last bottom, and that's come back up, and we'll see if there's another bottom. I have more money waiting for the next round. And when I think about where I'm going to invest next, I may invest in some things that make sense because they're going to be popular. But I'm also going to invest in the things that were popular before. If you think air travel's gone forever, you're kidding yourself. If you think that tourism and hospitality is gone, you're kidding yourself. If you think that the economy is going to stay down for a long, long, long time, you're kidding yourself. Everything's coming back because the real answer is, how do you want to be positioned in 6 months to 24 months? The day that someone gets on camera, which could be in 2 weeks, but I think it's more likely a few months to a year or two, and says, we have found the cure. We have a vaccine, or unfortunately, we never got it done as a country, and 72% of people have had it, and it's kind of gone away now because we have herd immunity. In that moment, when they say that, you are now running a business in the most successful economy, arguably in American history, and certainly one that's much better than our rock bottom. And will you be positioned with superb, amazing superstars, with strong marketing, high-level rankings in every website, a huge social media following, paid social media ads that are in front of the right markets? Or are you going to say, well, I saved my money and I kind of like laid a bunch of people off and I kind of wanted to minimize because the new normal and not everyone's going to want to come to the office and everybody doesn't want to go anywhere and we're all going to stay inside. And those things may all be true for a short period. And we do need to be frugal and careful in the way we spend, but actually you're positioning yourself. So I recommend you put little small amounts of money in things that could double or triple or go 10x. And that could be your business. It could be a new business. It could be a stock. I think you should invest heavily in marketing your business so you're atop the rankings so you can get the 10x effect when things go up, back up 20, 30, 40, 50%. By the way, the NASDAQ's up this year. COVID caused growth in the NASDAQ this year. Stocks aren't even that much down. It's crazy, but it just sort of is. So we need to be forward thinking, but get away from the doomsday, get away from the news, and be thinking about where you want to be in a couple of years and how you're going to be positioned to own market share. The pie is going to get smaller in terms of revenue available. People are going to get laid off. People are going to be buying a little less for a year or two, maybe. But there's also going to be a lot of people who go out of business. And there's going to be less people eating out of that pie. So you can still take your full share. So it's not the economy, it's your economy. It's not the unemployment rate, it's your employment rate. It's not COVID-19, it's whether it's affecting you in that moment from a business perspective. And it's about how you position your business. And my attitude is we're building towards something ridiculously big to come, because we want to take advantage of it. Because we've been through 08. We're going to have another recession in a few years. And I do recommend you set aside 2 months worth of real revenue for your entire personal expenses and your business expense. So if you're doing 200 grand a year as a practice, you need 400 grand in the bank plus 2 months of your entire personal expenses, maybe 3. So if you live personally off of 5 grand a month or 30 grand a month, that's 10 or 60 grand a month saved, so that you're prepared for when we may get closed down again, especially in left-leaning states like California, or a hard hit state like New York. So you're ready if you or someone on your team gets COVID and you have to fumigate, clear out, shut down the business for 2 or 3 weeks, because it's your fault next time if you're not prepared. It was no one's fault the first time this global pandemic happened, but it's going to be your fault next time. So save, yes, but reinvest in profit centers, yes, and position yourself, because this not only shall pass, but it's already passing, and the market's already there and back. And all we have to do is mitigate and navigate the next few months to year or two. And if you do that, you're going to come out of this just humming.
I couldn't agree more. And that's exactly how we're thinking, right? This, I said a few moments ago or earlier in the podcast that, for certain individuals, I'm looking at their 2021, I'm looking at our 2021. But I also think what you're saying is, as much as it might be impossible to very specifically and minutely long range plan for each month of the next 36 months or 48 months or 60 months, you still need to be thinking about 2023, 2024, 2025. For most of you who might be listening who are not retiring anytime soon, I think like you still talk about the most recent client that signed on for long term in Michigan, about her being forward thinking. The whole nature of our discussion was, she's like, I'm not retiring anytime soon. I got at least another, probably 10 years. I want those to be the best 10 years ever. And I'm looking at this as an opportunity to lean into this, not succumb to it. And she's already thinking about, having her new coordinator starting in 2021 or whenever it ends up being, and then having maybe the best 5 to 10 years of her career because of this, and really leaning into it.
It's not even just the next year or two, it's positioning for what happens if tomorrow they come up with a medicine. There's not gonna be a vaccine for the longer, but a medicine that says, you may get sick, but you won't die now. Just like that. That could happen any moment. It's probably not gonna happen for weeks, but it's probably not going to take years. And so how are you positioned for that? There's a magic moment coming, is my point. There is a moment when the president or someone gets on TV, or a CEO of some company, and says, amazing news, we have a medicine that stops people from dying, or we have a vaccine and it's coming out soon. The day that happens, you better have your money in the right stocks. The day that happens, you be positioned well for the number of calls that are going to come in, because that magic moment will come sooner or later, and your investments now and your structuring now really affects that. And that's why, no one can predict. No one knows what was going to happen. I didn't know which businesses were going to do well or not. And for us, our attitude has been, let's work hard, be positive. And, I think all business lines are growing for us. I think we're going to be up this year, not down, not because we're special, but because we positioned ourselves well, we structured our contracts accordingly, we planned for this, because I've been through it. Again, I said last podcast, I've lost a house in a hurricane. I've been basically near bankrupt once in my life after doing nothing wrong and doing everything right. And I've been through a bunch of market crashes, and we're going to be positioned and ready. So yes, save big and have that money set aside for the future, but position yourself well and make small, smart investments so you're positioned well for that magic moment, because the magic is coming, even if it's mostly just for the next 2 or 3 months, getting back to the OR, getting back in there, running your business, putting the hard work in, and just busting your butt.
Yep. Amazing.
Well, folks, we could go on for hours, and we won't, but we probably already did. A couple little announcements. We have less meetings to announce than normal, although we are currently on faculty for Vegas Cosmetic Surgery in September, as well as the American Academy of Facial Plastic and Reconstructive Surgery, the AFPRS meeting. We're going to see if those happen and what the story is, but we're excited to do those virtually, live, or otherwise. We appreciate being invited and participating. If you haven't, make sure you check out university.realself.com. Both Ed and I, over the last 2 months, I did a COVID-related podcast specifically with Eva Shea, their director of training. And Ed did one prior to that a couple months before, but there's a lot of good content, not just from us, but other smart minds in the industry. So go to university.realself.com to see our most recent podcast that we did with them. It's my most entertaining one I think I've done in years, if I may say. I wouldn't say I never say I'm good or not, but it was fun, and we had a good time doing it. We're just waxing on TikTok and social media and all kinds of trends and things going on, so check that one out. We are generally available, like we mentioned, actually, although we expected YellowTelescope to have a little bit of a downturn, as anyone would, and certainly it wasn't a great month for us. We are actually booking more clients and booked out quite a ways. Some of our basically Dan, Ed, and me, we're booked out basically till Q4 heading in, and some of us are booked out to Q1 of 2021. You don't get billed till later, but you want to start the conversation now so you can, if you decide to hire us, have a plan and a strategy. We understand a lot of people are a little cash poor right now, a little worried about spending, but we've got different structures that we can create so you can kind of build into 2021 with us if you like what you're hearing. If you are not spending money on web and you don't love your web team, or you're having less than satisfactory lead counts, get in touch with us. We have a free service called SEO Oversight. It doesn't cost anything. We just match you up with key quality vendors that can do the work that you need, whether you need something like a new phone system, whether you need something like medical supplies at a cheaper price or PPE, whether you need a better SEO or live chat or pay-per-click marketing. And then of course we have our social media company, Ice Cream Social Media, and that's been going gangbusters. We're actually, I wouldn't say we're booked out because we're able to handle a wider volume without getting fully booked like our consulting, but we have had our best month of growth, I think maybe in company history, at least close to it. So get in touch if you want that. It's everything from very, very small campaigns for awareness, for paid social media through TikTok marketing, Instagram, Facebook. But if you're not on TikTok and you're not utilizing it for it, again, you're utilizing us for it, again, you're missing out. You can follow me at The Real John Hoffenberg on the talk. It's kind of funny, irreverent, kind of R-rated, so don't follow me if you don't like a bad word here or there. But things are really growing there, and if you're behind on the social media bandwagon, whether you love it or hate it, we have both. That's why we scream for ice cream. It's Ice Cream Social Media. You want to get in touch about that. We're going to keep putting out great content, hopefully to help / keep building our business. We remain available at info@YellowTelescope.com for any inquiries or questions. And we can't wait to see everybody out there again. We miss everybody. Check in with us. Let us know how you're feeling, doing, how the family is. And we're happy to set up a little Zoom whiskey or whatever else you might want to do. Ed, anything that I've missed that's worth covering?
Not at all, per usual, quite thorough. He's a good consultant and thorough.
Well, I can tell you, I hope that our next podcast is at least me from the Hamptons, from Bridgehampton, New York, at our summer place, waving to Ed, probably still at his now summer place, his second home in Jupiter. It sounded a little bougie, but we don't mean it that way. But excited to get a little bit of time away with my son and with my family. We're going on a boat, I think, this weekend, which will be fun, sort of a socially distanced boat with very few, if any, of our friends, but that'll be fun. And I hope everything gets a little closer to normal. We wish everybody a safe, healthy, happy Memorial Day, June, and July to come.
Same here. Stay safe and healthy. Hope to see everybody soon. Thanks, John. Cheers.
Cheers. Miss you, buddy.
You too, man.
Play us out. Jill, Tom, Jill.